my name's Kim Johnson. I'm the MP for Liverpool Riverside, and you're listening to the Black History Month podcast.
So welcome to the University of Liverpool podcast series of Black History Month. We'd like to welcome Kim Johnson MP today. And I'm Darren Mooney, the Diversity Quality Officer, and with your co-host with Scylla Ancro-Lucas.
Hi again, Kim. I'm a board member at Liverpool University. So obviously it's nice to meet you, and I know we're all in a big push for time, so we're probably going to start quickish, soonish.
Thank you so much.
So welcome everybody. So Kim, should we start off with a bit about yourself, a bit of your background?
So Darren, I was born and raised and grew up in Liverpool 8. I was born in a home in Canning Street, but my house is now gone. You know, I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and I'm the mum of twins. I went to school in Liverpool 8, and then I went to an all-girls school in Wavertree. So growing up in Liverpool 8 and going to the St Margaret's was a wonderful experience for me. I loved my childhood. I loved going to school. It was very diverse, and I thought that was the way of the world. But you know, I got a real bump to reality when I went to an all-girls school, my secondary all-girls school just down the road in Wavertree, so Lawrence Secondary School for Girls.
Oh, yeah.
To find that I was one of only a few black girls in that school. You know, and so that was, you know, a reality in terms of what life was going to be. It was a taste of what was to come, I suppose, for me. So I left that school, went to a comprehensive because they didn't do O and A levels. And at New Hayes, I started doing sociology, which was great, again, for me, because it was an eye-opener. You know, the study of society and behaviour, it kind of put things into perspectives. And so that kind of spurred me on to want to do other things. And so after I left the comp, I went to the community college to do A-levels. And kind of in the middle of that, my dad died. You know, my dad died at 51 with a clot on the brain, which was devastating to my mum and the whole family. You know, she was left a widow at 41, and we were devastated because my dad was very fit and healthy. He didn't smoke, he didn't drink, he walked everywhere. So that was very difficult. And at the time, I started doing some voluntary youth work at the Methodist, and that got me interested in that kind of work. And then I went off to do a course at Crewe and All Sager College, became qualified youth and community worker, and then spent 20 years doing youth and community work in and around Liverpool, Sefton, Cheshire. And I really loved it. I loved working with people. I loved being able to enable people to make changes in their own communities and make choices for themselves, and provide the opportunity for people to have a voice, you know, and involved, you know, putting on training courses and doing a range of things. But, you know, it would be true to say that my career kind of meandered somewhat after doing community work. I worked in a early years development and childcare partnership after the 97 general election, when the Blair government invested quite a lot of money into early years, and I could never fault. I could fault Tony Blair on a lot of things, but in terms of the work he did in terms of investing in early years was, you know, really, really positive, because it was about Sure Start, it was about childcare opportunities, enabling people to get back to work. Then from there, I worked for Government Office Northwest, and I was setting up Sure Start programs in and around Manchester and Greater Manchester, and again gave me great opportunity meeting, you know, some fantastic people, because Sure Start, as you know, is all about integration. So bringing all these public sector services together to provide better life opportunities for a lot of our disadvantaged communities, so that when kids got to school, they were able to read and stuff, and so their opportunities were improved for the rest of their lives. So Sure Start for me was great, and there was lots of really positive feedback in terms of how that support was enabling some of the most disadvantaged kids in those communities. But I think for me, sadly, what you get sometimes is teachers in some schools that have been there since the year dot have these expectations that kids are going to fail irregardless. So they're already pigeonholed. And I think that still applies today, unfortunately, with a lot of our schools, because I was very surprised the other day to learn from the head of our FE college that 2/3 of the 3,000 students that go to her college don't have maths and English, which I think is a real sad indictment of our education system and people being failed by the education system. You know, so I got involved in all that kind of work, and then I was involved in arts kind of as a hobby to a certain extent. I set up a theatre group with a friend. We did like community shows and stuff. I started doing some volunteer work in the Everyman and Playhouse. Then opportunities came, jobs came available for Culture 08, and that's when I got the job as the cultural diversity manager. And then got involved in the trade union movement, and then got active in politics. And here I am now, love, you know, so sorry. I meandered all over the place with that. I'm very sorry, but yeah.
Kim, that is brilliant. You've actually answered
all of your questions.
The question, well, at least 2 of them already. I was just going to ask you about how, you know, your involvement in politics, and it sounds like that's just something that was a natural progression from what you're saying.
Well, I think it was, you know, and when I was growing up as a black girl in Liverpool, my dad always used to say that, you know, as a black person, you have to work twice as hard. And as I mentioned, doing sociology when I went to New Hayes was a big eye opener as well. I'd always, you know, been a supporter of the Labour Party and always been a trade unionist from the moment I started work, because I didn't have a choice really, because my dad, you know, said you go to work, you join a trade union, because that was what the way things went in those days, wasn't it? And so my first proper job from leaving college and stuff was in the tax office, you know, based in town in India Buildings in town. And there was quite a few young people there. And again, I was the only black person, but I had a great time working in the tax office, because we had, you know, a fantastic social side of things. And I joined what was the PCS at that time, but I was only a member, didn't get involved. So I only really got involved and active in the trade union movement when I worked for the city council. And management decided they would do a service review. So management, you know, proposed this service review, and we had consultation, and because I was one of the only few who challenged it and spoke up about it, the trade union reps at the meeting suggested that I might want to be a workplace rep and represent the staff at management meetings. So I decided to do that. I thought, well, yeah, that'll be great, sitting around the table listening to how these make decisions. And so that's how I got involved in Unison as a workplace rep originally, because of that service review. And in the end, the service review got scrapped. But then I was elected as an officer in my branch, which was the Liverpool City branch. I got involved in regional stuff then, and then found out that we have the self-organised group. So black self-organised, disabled women, LGBT. You know, I just thought unions were, you know, a place where workers were represented and you got called out on strike, you know, because that's what you used to see in the media, didn't you? You know what I mean? That they were extremely kind of pushed towards making people go on strike all the time. Anyway, so I found out that unions were far more than just that. And particularly in Unison, self-organized groups, the different service groups. We had, a fantastic international element to our union, and I had the great opportunity of traveling to South Africa and meeting cis brother and sister unions in South Africa, and got involved in the regional Black Members Committee and then the national Black Members. I was deputy chair of both. And again, great opportunities, networking with people. We have a Black Members Conference beginning of every year, and Unison's Black Members Conference is the largest gathering of Black workers across Europe. Gave a lot of people an opportunity to network, and great for Black staff who work in isolation in a lot of organisations. Mm-hmm. And we contributed to making changes within the union, and it was great being able to do that. But don't get me wrong, I do have criticisms of the unions, and again, like other public sector organisations, they're not representative of the communities in which they serve. At the top of the organisations, predominantly white as well, just not long after I got involved in regional politics, the regional trade union movement, they developed a DVD to show how austerity was having an impact on public sector workers, but they failed to include any Black people in that DVD. And so I raised it and fought it and challenged it, and in the end they took it off the shelf and scrapped it. And that was a big eye opener for them, and in terms of, you're going to do anything in future, you need to make sure that it's representative of all of our members. And that was a bit challenging, because I had some senior officers saying, well, we can't do anything, it's going to go up the way it is, we can't change. I'm thinking, don't think so. Anyway, so that was another battle that I won as well. So have I answered your question, or have I meandered again?
No, it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant, Kim. Very, very interesting, and nice to hear how you have instigated change. Yeah. You have actually instigated change, Brilliant. No, excellent. I don't know if Darren wants to say anything. He's answered all of my questions.
So you touched on before about your role in capital culture.
Yeah.
So was that as creative diversity manager?
It was, Hun.
And I suppose some of our listeners won't be aware of capital culture and how it came about. And it'd be really just interesting to learn about your involvement and what that meant, especially with the mantra of a world in one city. What does that look
like? One city, great strapline, but and that's all it was, because clearly, we're not a world in one city. There are massive issues about race equality in the city, and I make no apology, when I say that structural racism is a major issue in this city. How many senior Black officers do you see? Black lecturers. There's a lot of issues about students gaining qualifications or being able to move on to do doctorates and stuff. So there's major issues in the city. So the world in one city, we are not. But, everybody loved it, because I think to the outside world, Liverpool is seen as this great cosmopolitan city. We have the longest established Black community. We have some really long established, the Yemeni community, Somali community, the Chinese community. So it is seen as this great place. And you know what? I love Liverpool. It's a great city. I will always defend it to its hilt, but I am very conscious is that there's a lot of work that needs to be we need to do to make sure that everybody has the same level of opportunities in this city, and that goes for some of our white working class people in very disadvantaged areas who are failed again by our public services and the education system. So the world in one city now, but in terms of what it did for the city was fantastic. It put Liverpool on the world stage, and it was, I think, the turnaround for the city. It created a major renaissance for the city, to the point where we are now in terms of our visitor economy prior to COVID. It was amazing. you know, in terms of the number of people that travel here from all over the world because of our history, and not just for the Beatles, you know what I mean, for our waterfront, for our history, you know. So I think it did do great things for the city. But I still have a lot of criticism about our arts-based organisations. They're not representative. Their programmes aren't representative. The board and their staff aren't representative. And at the moment, the Everyman and Playhouse are doing some work in terms of looking at and challenging that. But at the time when I was the creative diversity manager and dared to raise those issues with the organisations, they didn't like it. My manager didn't like it. I was chastised for daring to say that they weren't doing enough, you know, and I still stand by. They haven't done enough, they're still not doing enough, you know, so.
Yeah, so it's a question of legacy, isn't it? Is how much of the legacy left the city centre and went into communities?
But, you know, the legacy is in the city centre, but I can say as a worker for the company that we did a lot of work in communities as well. You know, funding was disseminated to a lot of different groups, community voluntary organisations to undertake, you know, key pieces of work within their own communities. And there was kind of integrated work, you know, with the Somali women groups and women's groups in the north end of the city. There was a lot of that stuff going on, and that was great. But if you don't have the funding to sustain that, then it's very difficult. And so that, you know, because, you know, with funding, it tends to be quite piecemeal. And a lot of the funding that we've had in the city to do regeneration tends to be very short-termism, and it doesn't really help, because you're getting to the point where you're starting to make change and then the funding is finished, and then lots of communities are then failed again, you know. So, and again, I've diverted from the question that you were asking me. I'm sorry, Darren.
But very interesting.
No, because it's true, because as you say, a lot of research funding, a lot of projects are 1 year, 2 year, maybe 3 years at best.
Yeah.
But by the time you get to the point of being able to deliver change, or you've got to capacity, it stops.
The funding stops, yeah.
And I think that is, but one of the things for me that was great is that we have a long established traveller community, static traveller community in the city centre. But if you didn't know, it was there because it's hidden behind this massive wall, almost next door to Costco.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I did was, you know, got them involved in various things, the Lord Mayor's Parade, got funding to do other things, and made them more visible, and made people aware that, you know, their community existed, you know, because we know that unfortunately that community is vilified by a lot of people. So it was including them, and they were just, you know, really pleased to be able to play a part and play a role in the celebrations.
Thanks, Kim. You were elected in 2019. You took over from Lewis Elman. She, you know, represented the constituency for 22 years. How do you feel it's going personally for yourself?
Well, I would say that I have been on a very steep learning curve. Very steep learning curve, because this time last year, it wasn't on my radar, you know, it wasn't on my bucket list to become an MP. We were having discussions in the CLP about what we were going to do if an election was called. And we were looking and having discussions about selection processes and stuff. And a couple of people from the party and my union kind of suggested that I might want to think about it. And at that point, I hadn't thought about it, but I said that I would. And then things happened very quickly, you know, given that she resigned, and then the election was called, and then I was selected as the prospective parliamentary candidate. And then I had 6 weeks of campaigning. And then I was elected, and then from being elected on the Thursday, Friday morning, then heading into Parliament the following Monday, to be kind of inducted, as it were. And it was just surreal, because, you know, in terms of thinking about my role, because I turned 60 this year, and working in the local authority, have the opportunity to reduce your hours. And so I thought I'll reduce my hours, I'll do some courses, I'll take it easy, you know. So that was my intention, and but that didn't work. But I just have to say that I am very proud and very privileged to have been elected as the MP for the constituency, because as I mentioned, I was born, I grew up, and I still live in this area. So I have a vested interest in terms of making things better for the constituency, and particularly young people, because we know that as a result of COVID, young people will be significantly affected, you know, in terms of jobs and education and opportunities going forward. You know, so being elected has been a steep learning curve. And what people don't tell you is that it's like setting up a business, because I had to set up an office in London, an office in the constituency. I had to employ staff. You have to get used to all the processes and the procedures, because they're all very arcane, aren't they? You know, and prior to COVID, you could sit in the chamber and listen to what was going on. And if you wanted to butt in and challenge something another MP was saying, you'd stand up and say, "Would my good friend give way?" And so all of these things that just do not sit comfortably. And when you enter the chamber, you're supposed to bow to the speaker and then take your seat. So all of those kind of things, all that level of deference, I suppose, I find very difficult. So to the point where I tend not to come through the main door into the chamber. I sneak around the back and then sit on the back seat. So I tend not to do a lot of that. But there's you know, a lot to take on board in terms of, you know, how you address people, how you submit questions. And though it's a very steep learning process, but getting there slowly but surely. And I am also very lucky in that going to Parliament on your own would be a very scary and lonely place. But I'm very lucky that I've gone to Parliament with Paula, who was the MP for Wavertree, who I knew through Unison, and Mick Whitley in Birkenhead, who I met at various events. And so it's been nice to have, you know, peers that you can go to, you can share with, you can offload to, you know, and having that level of peer support is so important. And I'm really grateful to be able to have that support. And also friends that I've made since being there, you know, from other constituencies. It is really important, because it can be, as I say, very lonely.
Really interesting. You're obviously very good at what you're doing as well, by the way.
Oh. Trying.
Is there such thing as a typical day in the life of MP, or is it different every day?
I'd say, Darren, yeah, every day is different to a certain extent. We get notices from our whips to say there's an urgent question, there's a statement, and you put your name forward, and it's a ballot every day. So not everybody gets to speak on everything they want to. So if your name gets pulled out, you get put on a call list, and they can go to the chamber to talk on whatever, you know. So last week I asked a question of Matt Hancock and Boris, and then I spoke on Yemen yesterday afternoon. So it all depends on whether your name comes out. But I also sit on the Education and Women's Select Committee, and so we have set days. So Tuesday mornings, education, Wednesday afternoon, Women's Select. So there's some certainty there. On a Monday evening, we have our PLP meetings. And so, but every day is different in terms of, I'll have various Zoom meetings with trade unions, or I'll have a Zoom with groups from my constituency or individuals from my constituency, hold surgeries over Zoom. So yeah, so every day is different depending on what's going on, but makes life very interesting.
And very busy.
Well, busy, honestly, because where my office is on the estate to where the chamber is a walk away. And so if we have to vote, You have to make sure that you're in the vicinity, because all these bells start ringing and you have to leg it. But I do have a nice office though that overlooks the river and the London Eye, so I can't complain really.
Beautiful, lovely, lovely. You're Liverpool's first black MP.
Yeah.
Is that something you consider to be an important distinction to make? And what does it actually mean to you to be the first black MP in Liverpool?
And again, Phil, I would say that, you know, I am very proud to have been elected as the first black MP. But it also saddens me, you know, there is such a sad indictment on the city.
Yes.
That has such a long established black community that it has taken this long. But what I don't want it to do is to define me, because I represent a constituency that is very diverse, you know.
Absolutely.
In terms of, you know, socioeconomic, we have some wards that are quite affluent, you know, so, and I don't want it to define me, but I am a black MP. My heritage is African and Irish, and I'm very proud of both sides of my heritage. But I think being the first black MP, I do feel that I can't put a foot wrong, if you know what I mean.
Oh, no, you can't.
You know, as the first, you know, they'll be coming and saying things, you know, but and I am wary of that a lot of the time. But I've always been a gobby black woman, you know, and not afraid to say things that I need to say when I need to say it. And some people like that, some people don't like that, but that's who I am. And I'm a firm believer in a straight line. And if I've got something to say, then I'll say it, and I'll say it to someone's face direct without me answering, because I think, well, honesty for me is always the best policy, you know. But I do think, well, one of the reasons I got involved in local politics, if I'm honest with you, and elected as the black members officer for Riverside CLP, was that I got so frustrated at the lack of black political representation in the city. You know, we have, out of 90 councillors, only 6 black Labour councillors. And again, that is, you know, such a sad indictment. And you've got some CLPs that have the thought process, well, you know, we've got no black people living here, and so black people won't get voted in this area, so we're not going to bother looking at selecting anybody to represent this community. And I think that tends to be the mindset. And I think a lot of the onus on challenging racism in politics in the city, I would say, has fallen on Riverside, you know, to a large extent in terms of instigating change. But before I was elected, I put a motion into the Liverpool Campaign Forum to say that all CLPs needed to look at making change, and they needed to be looking at identifying black people in each of their constituencies to put forward, to mentor, to support, to put them on the panel, to be selected as councillors, you know, because something, you know, significant needs to happen. And while, you know, we are a city that fights racism and fascism, I think that's one thing, but it's about looking at the day-to-day racism that black people face in their workplaces, in the colleges, university shop, wherever. You know, it's not about, you know, standing on a demo and making the fascists, you know, get locked in cupboards in Lime Street Station or kicking them into touch. It's about looking at, as I say, that structural racism that affects black people on a daily basis, you know, and the lack of representation across all public and private sector organisations.
How do you feel the Liverpool black community has reacted to your election?
I would have to say, in terms of the people I've met, it's been positive, you know, because I am a Liverpool-born black person. You know, I went to school. A lot of people know me, people that still live in the community. I went to school with, I've worked with, I've known because of projects I've been involved in the past, you know. So I would say that being someone that's known in the community has helped. But I'll always have those naysayers who didn't agree with my selection. But I would honestly say that I've had a lot of very positive support right across the board. I had a lot of support from my CLP, from my wards, from the unions and stuff. And so, a lot of support. So I'm quite lucky to be able to say that I've had a lot of support, and I really appreciate everything that everybody did to ensure that I was selected as the MP for Liverpool Riverside.
Excellent. You're obviously a very strong, assertive woman. It comes across, and I think to be in the position that you're in, you have to be.
Yeah.
And being a black woman as well makes that even more important. And doing a good job.
Well, it does, because I get sick and tired of being classed as when you are assertive as a black woman, and I heard this from other black women as well.
Aggressive.
Being aggressive. I think
aggressive.
No, I've got a voice. I'm using it. And this is the way I sound. But the comparison to white assertive women is not the same, is it?
Absolutely not. No. Absolutely not. And I can empathise with that, obviously, as a very strong black assertive woman myself. So yes.
But I've always been that way inclined. If I see something happening in the community that shouldn't be happening, like kids smashing bottles or doing stuff, I would be that person to say, hey, don't do that. Or you should be doing something else. And when I was out with my kids when they were little and I'd intervene and stuff, they'd be mortified. Why are you doing that for, Mum? I think because people need to challenge where things aren't are wrong and are not right. So if you see someone vandalise in a school building or whatever, you have to say, don't do that.
Yeah, agree.
You touched on a few key challenges already. I was just wondering, is there any key policy challenges that you think you would want to bring up in Liverpool, or is it the type of things you've already talked about?
Well, do you know what, Darren? We're living in very difficult times, aren't we? I think COVID-19 has shone a very bright light on the social, economic and health inequalities that exist. We, Rishi Sunak yesterday talking about this new work support package. But what we'll have in the coming months will be a major job tsunami. People will lose their jobs. That'll be the worst recession that we've ever had. And coming back from that is going to be very difficult, and this is on top of our young people being failed by the government, the DfE, Ofqual, in terms of the exam fiasco. A lot of our young people, as we know, would have been marked down because that's what happened. If you are a bright person in a school, in a disadvantaged ward, you would have got lower grade predictions than counterparts, which has had a major impact on some people. They mightn't have got a university, they've deferred for a year. So in terms of young people and workers, it's significant. We are dealing with a major significant crisis, but this is on top of 10 years of extreme austerity, because you will know that Liverpool was hit hard by this Tory government. 64% of central government funding they robbed from us, which has had a significant impact on the city. Yet I believe that the council have done a fantastic job in terms of supporting our most vulnerable, rough sleepers off the street and in safe accommodation, and providing support to our freelancers, to our business sector. And we have been left, as mentioned to Boris the other day, a 24 million funding gap because we did what was expected of us. So significant challenges along the way. And no doubt this government will make working people pay for the support that they've provided in the last 6 months, billions. And it will be us, in terms of, you saw what happened in terms of universal credit, so I just think it's going to be scary times ahead for a lot of people. You know, they're refusing to lift the block on evictions. What's that going to mean to particularly private sector renters, you know, turfed out on the street, made homeless? I just think in terms of policy, some really scary times ahead. And then, you know, Brexit, what's Brexit going to be? A no deal Brexit? You know that we as a city voted, you know, to remain. 74% to whether it was the city or my constituency anyway. Anyway, to remain, because we know that European funding really helped and supported this city in terms of infrastructure, you know, and benefited significantly. And I heard the other day that there was significant amount of unspent ERDF funding, and if it's not spent, it goes back to the government, goes back to Europe. So I've made some inquiries about how we can use that and utilise it before that has to happen.
Yeah. Thanks, Kim. The Black Lives Matters, those protests brought back into the public conscience the issues of inequalities and racism. How do you feel we can maintain that level of engagement in any anti-racism work that we do?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, Black Lives Matter and COVID-19 shone a very bright light on race equality in the city. At the beginning of the pandemic, the disproportionate number of deaths of Black people as a result of COVID, again linked to socio-economic health inequalities that exist. The fact that most of our key workers tend to be Black, low paid, on precarious contracts, and I think that has been highlighted. You know, the government undertaken to do some research, but you know, from my point of view, I'm sick of research. Don't need any more reports. We know what the problems are. We know that poverty is a major driver in terms of those levels of inequality. And I think what we need to do is to look at how we address that. So working closely with trade unions, looking at wage increases, providing greater levels of opportunities in terms of education and training, and improved housing, all those things that need to happen. And looking at going forward, you know, in the city, Tracy Gore will be leading the race task force in Liverpool. But a lot of organisations have now gone, ooh, yes, we need to do something. But it's about keeping the pressure on those organisations, because when I was first elected at the beginning of this pandemic, I wrote out to schools and public sector organisations to find out what their employment stats were for Black people. And so unsurprisingly, you know, very, very low, very, very low. And one of the key issues for me are the low levels of Black teachers that we have in our schools, the fact that we have none or very few governors on our governing school governing bodies, because I'm a firm believer that, you know, if we have no Black people around the table, then Black people's issues aren't heard or addressed. So that needs to significantly change. And I don't know whether you're aware that, you know, the city has engaged with Operation Black Vote and they've recruited 30 people to get involved in levels of civic leadership in the city. So sitting on various boards, whether it be health boards, school boards. And I think that needs to be rolled out even further so that all schools in the city have, you know, some level of representation. But for me, it's one thing recruiting staff to organisation, but it's another about retaining staff and dealing with inherent racism that exists still within organisations. And we've had a lot of Tory MPs going off recently this week about unconscious bias. Not a lover, don't believe in unconscious bias, because I think, you know, if you're a racist, you're a racist, and things ain't going to change, are they? No amount of training is going to make things any better, is what I say. So to some extent, I do hear what they're saying, but, you know, they've couched it in such a way that it just smacks of racism to me. And so it is about applying pressure. And it's about the local authority making a stand, because I worked for the council from 2005 and was always very vocal with Joe Anderson and chief execs about the underrepresentation and calling for positive action schemes, because that helped the city, back many years ago in the 80s. Those 80s, Jesus wept, so that's a long time ago. We had Merseyside skill training. We had positive action schemes in the council. So a lot of people working in public sector organisations did so through these schemes, and they had a lot of support as well in terms of mentoring and shadowing, and so that needs to be replicated. And I know it's going to be very difficult because people aren't going to be employing, but it's about enhancing opportunities for Black staff that do work in organisation. Because if you look at Liverpool City Council, we have a Black population in the city of something like 11.2%, but the council only employ just over 5.5% Black people. So clearly they're not employing staff that represents the community in which it serves. And that needs to change. And hopefully the race task force will make some inroads of making some significant long-lasting changes in the city. You go around Liverpool 1, how many Black people do you see? You go to your banks and building societies, you don't see Black people, so there is significant work to be done.
Yeah, you echo a lot of my own thoughts, obviously, and I think the difficulty as well for Black people is when they are actually employed in certain situations, they are the only one. They don't have support for themselves, and then they might find it difficult to be as assertive as they would like to be.
And you're quite right, because I used to hear that all the time from colleagues who used to come to our National Black Members Conference, working in isolation, and sometimes not getting the support from the union in tackling issues, or not getting support from their colleague. And I think if things are to change, because we as Black people experience racism, but it's incumbent on our white colleagues to change it, to be the driving force in terms of saying, well, what's going on? Why have we got Black people? Where are our equality policies? Why aren't they being implemented? What are our recruitment and selection processes? Because often you see, and I used to see it in the council, people would be given opportunities to act up, to be seconded for short-term projects, and then all of a sudden they've got this job permanently at a higher rate without going through processes. So there are all those kind of things, but for me, it's about providing opportunities for our young people. The government have recently instigated a new project called Kickstart, but the project is not the easiest. You have to recruit 30 young people, and so trying to do that, I think what a lot of groups are doing at the moment are working collaboratively, coming together to recruit young people, to support young people. And I think there needs to be an opportunity to say, well, out of that 30, 10, 15 need to be Black. Because that's the only way of making change. And I know some people don't like targets or quotas, but sometimes it's required if we are to make significant changes.
It's a starting point. It's a starting point. Yeah, excellent.
You mentioned the point of representation. This podcast also got Black History Month. I just wondered what your thoughts were on, is having a separate Black History Month a good thing, or is it something that should be more like Black History is a 365-day thing? Is that?
You see, Darren, I would say that Black history is all history, and it shouldn't need to be, sectioned off. And then you have Black History in October, and then people go to tick box and exercise, we've done it. And I think again, Black Lives Matter has highlighted, the issues that are prevalent within our education system. Black history isn't taught. We're taught about the empire, colonialism, things haven't changed from when I was back at school, the transatlantic triangle and slavery and stuff. So we don't get to find out about key Black players in history. The fact that, Black people were responsible for their own emancipation in terms of the slave trade, but you don't get to find out about that. It was all Wilberforce that, did it for us. And so I think we need to look at the narrative. We do need to change the education system so that we do get a more equal coverage of history, but not just history. The literature that's taught in school, tends to be very white, very Eurocentric. That needs to change. In art, looking at artists, music, the whole spectre of education and an understanding of the contribution of Black people to all spheres of life needs to be integral and in all aspects of education and all aspects of our society, really. Lenny Henry's got a show out, a new program out at the moment, talking about key musicians, alongside of Beethoven, that were Black, that people don't know about. So it's all of those kind of, scientists, inventors, all those kind of things that we as Black people just don't get to find out about. And I heard this divvy Tory MP in the chamber yesterday talking about how we need to big up Winston Churchill, what a great man he was. And I think, well, does that entail all of the atrocities that he was involved in, what he did in India, and I think as a white privileged MP, it's, he can talk about, we need to talk about that. All these Black people are saying that Winston Churchill was no good, but we need a broader picture about, what the empire did. It raped and pillaged our colonies, it stole our mineral wealth. And that's why, a lot of Africa and India are the way they are now. This government, drew arbitrary lines on a map, and now we are suffering wars and atrocities as a result of that. Anyway, I could go on.
You could.
About the role that the empire.
No, it's really good to hear.
It's brilliant.
I think I still taught myself that we had a British Empire. I never brought up in school. It was just something you'd learnt on TV.
That's what you knew. It was what you learned. Yeah.
But and I think there's a lot to be said how teachers are trained, as well. And I think teachers, need to be thinking outside of the box. And I've had some really interesting conversations with teachers outside of the city to say, what I did, for my pupils was that I went and found out myself, and did things within the set boundaries of the curriculum and did things differently, so it's about doing that. But it should be made clearer, because with that level of understanding in history, I think it would give people a better understanding of the contribution of Black people, because at the moment, we used to see on TV, Africa, poor Black people dying, and that's people's images of what Africa exists and how Africa is. They don't think about cities in Nigeria with skyscrapers. They think about mud huts and stuff, because that's people's perceptions.
What top 3 tips would you give someone interested in getting involved in politics?
Well, I'd have to say, Darren, right, as an individual, if you've got an interest in something, whether it's art, whether it's about social justice, it's about seeking out organisations within your local community. I was involved in the arts. I volunteered in a youth club, so it's about having an interest, finding out what's going on and getting involved and becoming active is what I'd say. But it has to be down to an interest and not just, for the sake of doing it.
Well, great. I think that brings us to time. So I'd like to thank you for joining us, Kim, today. I think it's been a really interesting conversation. I'd like to thank Scilla as well for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Bye. And Darren, and thanks for inviting me to join your podcast.
And thanks, Kim.
And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. And thanks for inviting me to join your podcast
hear from Kim and to hear about all of the things that she's been involved in. I really liked that she shared that she's been involved in lots of different things with a view to instigating change. She talked about having an interest, finding out what's going on, and then getting involved with that. She also talked about how it's incumbent on us all to look at and change the processes in the workplace to ensure inclusion. And that's something that I want to reflect on further to ensure that my practice is in line with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And I think I'll be doing the same thing. In fact, most of the Black History Month podcasts have highlighted the ongoing inequalities in our workplaces. The efforts of our featured guests to get to the positions that they are in have been remarkable. I mean, but it is really sad that they have found the struggle even harder just because of the colour of their skin. And it's made me wonder what I can do in my role in the university to be more inclusive of people from different backgrounds and how I can effect change in the systems that I work in to ensure equality. And I hope that's done something similar for everybody listening.
Absolutely. Well, there's lots in that episode and also in this Black History Month series for us to think about and reflect on in terms of our own personal practice. We'd love to hear from you in terms of your reflections and also hopefully how this has changed your practice. So please do tweet us at Live Uni Academy, and you can also find us at eLearnerMatt or at Alexandra_Owen on Twitter.
I'm really grateful for those who have taken the time to either rate or review our show in your podcast provider's app. So if you're an Apple user, as usual, please do take the time to review our show, as it really will help others find us. Bye for now.